Welcome to EcoEye. This week we explore a critical resource we all take for granted. Later, sustainability, alive and well at one of the most extraordinary farms in the country. And an unusual road bypass designed strictly for trout. But first, a power trip. We're off to Germany to see what happens when governments take renewable energy seriously. In 2002, a decade after the first Irish wind farm was built, permission was granted for a huge wind farm off the Wicklow coast. Ireland, it seemed, had entered the renewable age, but it hadn't. In fact, despite the apparent commitment by the government, Ireland's wind industry remains strangled by red tape. Incredibly, our national grid provider, EirGrid, has failed to plan for the integration of wind power. Until this bizarre situation changes, the energy of the future is on hold. We have got a very good wind condition in Ireland. Why are we not using wind energy in Ireland?
We have the best wind resource in Ireland. We can produce twice the amount of electricity from a wind turbine on the west coast of Ireland compared to the same wind turbine in Germany. So I think in the future we could be exporting wind energy. It's the jewel in Ireland's energy crown. And I think in 2020, if we look to the future, we'll be getting 50% of our electricity from the wind. There'll be over 10,000 people employed in the wind business. If I look even at the wind business in Germany today, it's worth over 4 billion euros a year, and there are 40,000 people employed.
Last year, Germany installed a record-breaking 3,274 megawatts of wind power, almost 20 times more than Ireland has managed in the last 10 years. This is the town of Husum in northern Germany, where a decommissioned shipyard is home to the country's leading wind energy specialist, Repower. Fritz, why has Germany been so successful in wind energy over the last 10 years?
There's a strong commitment of the government. Government is supporting renewable energy, and there's a law that means security for investors, and billions of euros has been directed in this sector. When we started in 1990, we had 0.1% of the electricity coming from wind. Today we have 5%, and it's going up every year by 1%. And that means we will decrease the electricity cost of wind energy every year by 1.5%. So in, let me say, 10 years, we will be competitive without any support of subsidies, and will beat nuclear, we will beat oil, and we will beat gas.
Germany's commitment to renewable energy, driven largely by the Social Democratic Green Party, was based on simple common sense. An overdependence on imported fuel, concerns about nuclear power, and spiralling greenhouse gas emissions all kept wind power high on the national agenda. So how has the country benefited from this over that short period of time?
Well, we have an ecological benefit. We have CO2 reduction because we are producing 5% of our electricity consumption by wind energy without any emission. And on the other hand, we have a lot of employment. We have a branch created with 45,000 employees in the moment.
So you've got 13,000 megawatts of wind energy. We've got 166. A huge difference. So what should we in Ireland do then?
Well, the key is giving some regulations by getting some incentives and some financial benefits for the project. And one of the key figures is getting a fixed price for the whole lifetime of the turbine, because every investment in renewable energies is a long-term investment. That's not for a quick business. And therefore you have to have a reliable basis for the contract where you sell the electricity to the grid. Everybody who is going to invest in a wind power plant is knowing that he gets some fixed prices over the period of 20 years, over the whole lifetime of the turbine.
If somebody, a farmer, local community, whatever, decided that they wanted to build a wind farm in their area and they got planning permission for it, has the public utility got to buy their energy?
Yes, they are obliged by law. They have to take over the electricity from wind energy for a fixed price.
Wind energy is an energy out of the rural areas, and agriculture is going down. And the farmers are supporting it because they're earning money. They are turning to electricity producers. That's the vision. Farmers will be part of the electricity community.
Among the farmers who made the switch to power generation was John Ingerson. 10 years ago, faced with the drop in farm incomes, he and his neighbours formed a cooperative, took out a bank loan and financed a small wind farm. Through the government guaranteeing a stable unit price for his electricity, last year he was able to take advantage of newer technology and replace some of his older turbines with bigger ones. Having them on the land doesn't interfere with any of his other activities and provides him with comfort, as the windmills will be generating a new source of income well into his retirement.
We should take advantage, for example, of our wasted peatlands where we have acres of disused, milled peatland that would be absolutely ideal for large-scale wind farms, and also our offshore wind energy resource, particularly along the east coast where we could see large-scale wind energy development. And also for farmers looking for alternative income, wind energy is absolutely ideal. He can get €4,000 per wind turbine a year just simply by having it on his land.
You have the potential because you have this high wind speed, and bringing technology and wind together, that would not only be a sustainable electricity meeting the Kyoto Protocol, but also creating jobs in that country.
In some parts of Germany already they're getting 50% of their electricity from wind energy. I think like any new technology, we need to have a good support system, need a good regulatory regime, good support from government to get the wind industry moving here.
The wind we exploit in Germany is coming from the Atlantic Sea, it's passing over Ireland. You can exploit it much better. I wonder whether the government is not really grabbing this big chance. You should start. It's time to act.
In the last decade, Ireland has seen an explosion in road building. While it's a long overdue improvement to the country's infrastructure, these new roads have a profound effect on the environment, especially when they cut through existing natural habitats.
Animals have homes just like us. And for instance, a badger will have his den and will then have its roots where it goes to eat. And so it's like a house. Imagine a road going through your house and it's going straight through your kitchen.
You remember how people were complaining about Christchurch, how the big road stopped people to go to their old pub? Well, that's exactly what is happening with animals, only it's more important than the pub. It's the actual breeding pond.
In the past, the environment fared badly when it came to construction, but these days it's a priority. Prevention is better than a cure, and avoidance of sensitive areas is key to the issue. We need to go around or over delicate habitats wherever possible.
If you can't completely avoid habitat fragmentation, you can make fauna passages. So for small animals like the badger, you'll have underpasses.
Under the EU Habitat Directive, which is the law which governs us here in Ireland as well, if there is a big infrastructure project, for example, a big road being planned, then you should avoid designated sites of important habitats and species. But if you can't avoid it, then the Habitat Directive says, okay, but then you compensate with an equivalent habitat of equivalent value, and you do it in time. Now, at the moment in Ireland, that is usually not done. We're simply ignoring it.
One place the EU directive wasn't ignored was at the northern end of the newly constructed N11 carriageway in Wicklow. This whole region was an established wildlife habitat, and when work finally got underway after endless months of public protests, it had to be done as sensitively as possible. Construction involved a series of mitigating measures, including relocation of an ancient marsh.
This area, as we see here, was part of an old council depot. The area was excavated, and the strip of marsh that was impacted by the road, we lifted the sods from it and transferred them into this area of marsh here. And the area was then flooded, and 1.5 years later, this is the result. There are two pipes just under me here which are connecting through to the marsh. One is set at a slightly higher level than the other and acts as a dry passage for mammals, and the other one then is set at a slightly lower level which floods and allows for the passage of amphibians as well as fish like minnow and stickleback that will also utilise it. Within the culvert we have created a ledge which allows for the animals to pass through under the N11 to utilise their territory, which is a linear strip along the river and into the marsh. This culvert connecting here was utilised within a week of having been installed by otters. So they're fairly adaptable animals, and we feel once they start using it, they'll continue to do so.
Further down the N11, as the road above was widened, another carriageway was created underneath. This is a fish pass, designed to imitate the natural pools and baffles of the Chapel River. It wasn't the cheapest solution, but it's paid for itself many times over in ecological terms.
Well, this river, the Chapel River, is an important spawning river for trout. In a normal fish pass or culvert, there would be just a simple pipe through which the water would flow at high velocity and too fast a flow for the fish to swim through. In this particular case, the stream passes down through a narrow gorge through a series of little steps and little pools. So this allows the fish to pass upstream and downstream during any flow conditions.
All of these measures have shown enormous success for these passages when they're put at the right place. You don't want to be putting them, it's just like if we put your kitchen back in the wrong place, you won't be able to use your kitchen. So you want to be putting these passes at the right place too.
If you feel that these measures should be the rule rather than the exception, you could lobby your local authority at the planning stage of new road schemes. Designs like these cost virtually nothing when they're adopted at the start of a new project.
Design like this, it's very difficult to do it on paper and get it absolutely right. But the lessons to be learned are that you can do a lot, you can achieve a lot. All that's really required is a little bit of involvement at the planning stage and being aware of how valuable habitat like this is, and it is being lost at an alarming rate.
You have the chance that you can now do your roads in a much more informed way and really give something to the next generations which works for everyone, not only the people but the animals.
Ireland has seen more development in the last decade than at any time in the last century. We've become so used to accelerated and intensive development that we've become almost resigned to the side effects. Waste, congestion, sprawl, and pollution are all part of daily life. Alternatives are few and far between, but they do exist, and more importantly, some of them actually work. This is Camphill, a therapeutic farm in Kilkenny. Part of a voluntary organisation for people with special needs. What you see here is a thriving farm community and an extraordinary example of ecological values in action.
A person with a disability, a reasonably severe one, let's say, cannot work for their life. They can't earn their living, but they need a life. They need a life as good as you or I. This idea that you have to work for your living, and if you're clever, you're a millionaire. We're working on something radically different to that.
Camphill is a living experiment where each individual contributes to community life according to their abilities. This philosophy of mutual respect also extends to the environment.
This is an effort to create a society in which there's no management class here. Nobody's getting paid more than anybody else because nobody's getting paid in the first place. And it's as important to sweep the floor well as it is to send an email or to negotiate the financial structures. And that it seems to me that goes hand in hand with ecological issues.
Starting out as a therapeutic farm, Camphill has grown to include a school, gardens, a weaving workshop, and a centre for the arts and music.
I suppose it has a lot to do with seeing the individual human being as a creative being and as spiritually intact. Able or disabled, we're all spiritually intact, and we are spiritually connected, we hope.
As a self-reliant community, Camphill has had to find innovative solutions to its own basic needs. In a sense, the whole site is a miniature ecological town. The farm supplies most of the community's food, with surplus stock sold at market. All wastewater is fed into reed beds where it's broken down and cleaned. And a biogas plant generates all heat and power. Later in the series, we'll take a closer look at that system. But for now, what's really intriguing is the way Camphill represents a whole new approach to community life, and the fact that it works. There's an ecological ethos here too. Can you tell us how important that is?
It's very important. I mean, in this social ecology of the community, the relationship to the earth and to your earthly circumstances is very important. The organic farming and gardening is a long-standing principle, but also to be ecologically aware.
So really you've got a whole integrated sort of ecological approach here from every aspect, even into your buildings here. I can see, you're using natural materials, you're using them in a very rustic, natural way set into the landscape. It's more than just the buildings, it's into the whole way you grow things and the whole way you use your waste and use that resource and
that's right.
Convert that
That's
into
right.
energy in a room.
The growth and development of the individual is reflected by the community, and that what the individual has to give is available to the community. Maybe the human race and the Irish society should foster these small alternatives, these ecological endangered bits, and because our system is working well.
It's just wonderful to come down here and feel what you're just saying and show that there is another way to live. I think it's a wonderful philosophy. You may not know it, but you're being watched. Every time you take a bath, fill a kettle, or wash your car, your habits and behaviour patterns are being closely monitored. Not by satellite or CCTV, but by underground sensors which monitor every drop of water you use. This year, new water conservation bylaws are coming into effect. It might seem strange, given the amount of rain we get, but when it comes to clean public drinking water, Ireland isn't as securely supplied as you think. Consider for a moment what happened in 1994.
The only time that people are aware that they've got a water supply is when it goes off. Up to that, water arrives at the tap. They don't think that it comes in through pipes that has maybe travelled for 3 days and has been treated and stored and controlled and pumped, perhaps in some cases, to get to their houses. They just turn on the tap and the water flows.
The water we drink and the water we flush our toilets with is identical. Treated, purified and delivered through the same pipes. Dublin has the longest and most sophisticated water main system in the country. It's far from perfect, but then again, few antiques are.
The Dublin region has always had very high quality water. The basis of our modern water system comes back from the 1860s and 1880s, when our Victorian forebears had great foresight and built great reservoirs up in the Dublin mountains. Dublin City is one of the few cities where you can drink the water comfortably directly out of the tap.
Dublin City Council has done well to keep up with the huge surge in demand since the 90s. But there's a much more daunting challenge to come.
Despite the savings that we're making, the increase in population, the increase in economic activity is increasing the demand for water all the time.
Over the next 10 years, at least 200,000 new houses and apartments will be built in Dublin. Dublin City Council already knows that the reservoirs won't be able to cope. Plans are already in place to draw water from as far away as the Shannon. And the problem goes way beyond Dublin. The entire country is approaching a situation where there just isn't enough clean water to go around.
If somebody is wasting water in one area, it affects the fact that we're taking water out of the Liffey or the Bartrey or the Dodder rivers and transporting it into the city for no good reason. We're trying to make sure that they only take and use as much water as they need.
So how much water do we actually use? Every day a city like Dublin gets through 110 million gallons. Or to put it another way,
If it was frozen into a block of ice, it would cover the pitch in Crow Park and extend above the Cusack Stand by 5 metres. So it's quite a large volume of water every day.
we're obsessed with what comes out of our taps, and for good reason. Ireland has had plenty of scares so far. Pollution of rivers and lakes by agricultural waste, industrial spills, seepage from landfill sites, and sewage. The list goes on. Sure, we have a right to clean water, but it doesn't come cheap.
Water is not a free product. In order to provide water, we need to collect it in reservoirs, treat it in treatment plants, and deliver it through 7,000 kilometres of mains until it reaches the tap of every single customer. So it's an expensive product, and it's essential that we reduce costs wherever possible.
Dublin Water, like any urban supply, is a living system in constant need of maintenance. Even now, a huge proportion of the supply is lost before it can be used.
There was a study carried out which identified that 42% of water was being lost from the system, and that has been reduced to 28%. We're still continuing to reduce leakage, and we still have a long way to go to get to a level that would be acceptable.
As the Council's work continues, we'll see the introduction of water efficiency guidelines for new homes. So what can new home buyers expect?
Low flush and dual flush toilets will be used. Water efficient shower heads will be used. And as a simple example, any hoses must be fitted with automatic cut-off devices to prevent that hose leaking away water unattended.
The new guidelines apply only to homes built after 2004, which means that other householders will be responsible for their own water conservation. Ireland doesn't have domestic metering yet, but it could happen. For now, that level of regulation is limited to industry and other large water users who'll have to supply water policy statements and face yearly audits.
We've carried out a number of audits working with our commercial users, and savings of up to 20% are possible with very little effort. We have a responsibility to make sure that quantity and quality are delivered when they are needed, and these bylaws are the mechanism with which the community can work together to ensure continuity of supply into the future.
In the coming years, it may be difficult to take water for granted. Monitoring systems can already detect surges and leaks down to the 1,000 house level. That's accurate enough for ground teams to locate the exact source within hours. But remember, as the Council enforces conservation, it has its own responsibilities. It's already spent €47 million of taxpayers' money fixing leaks, and nearly a third of Dublin's water is still pouring into the ground. From now on, we'll be watching them too. Well, that's it from EcoEye. Next time, we join forces with a group of volunteers working to save our native oakwoods. We show how Ireland has become a victim of its own tourist industry and examine the real cost of domestic waste collection. Also, we look at the greening of Ireland's rivers and lakes. See you then.